The underdog arrives. The Galactic Academy stood like a shining beacon amidst the stars, its massive spires glimmering with alien metals and advanced technology. It was a place where only the best, the brightest, and the strongest from every corner of the galaxy were invited. Inside, cadets from dozens of species trained, their scales, feathers, and glowing skin reflecting the lights of the grand halls. Among these exceptional beings walked a human named Daniel, a lanky figure with messy brown hair and a slightly awkward gait. As he entered the main hall for the first time, conversation stopped, and hundreds of alien eyes turned toward him. "Is that a human?" someone whispered, their voice tinged with disbelief. Laughter rippled through the crowd. "What's he doing here? Did the Academy lower its standards?" Another cadet sneered. Daniel kept his head low, gripping the strap of his bag tightly. He was used to being underestimated. Back on Earth, he had been told countless times he wasn't good enough. But this was a whole new level of humiliation. The alien cadets were larger, faster, and stronger. One species, the Thorexians, towered over everyone, their crystalline bodies shimmering like living diamonds. Another, the Zoveri, moved with unnatural speed, their insect-like limbs a blur. Everywhere Daniel looked, he saw perfection, except in himself. "All cadets, assemble." A booming voice interrupted the mockery. An imposing figure strode into the hall, a Rhinar general with scales that gleamed like polished obsidian. His sharp yellow eyes swept over the group before settling briefly on Daniel. His lip curled into something between a sneer and a smirk. "I am General Xylar, and I will turn you into the galaxy's finest warriors, or break you trying," he announced. His voice echoed through the hall. "You will face challenges beyond your imagination. Weakness will not be tolerated." Daniel felt the general's gaze linger on him for a moment longer. He swallowed hard, his palms sweating. "Let the trials begin," Xylar declared. The cadets were led to an expansive training arena. Massive holograms displayed the first challenge, a simulated battlefield where the goal was to retrieve an energy core from the center. The catch: advanced drones would defend the core, firing non-lethal but painful energy blasts. Cadets whispered amongst themselves, excitement buzzing in the air. Many of them had already started sizing up their competition. Daniel stood alone at the edge of the group, feeling small and out of place. His heart pounded as he watched the first few cadets enter the simulation. The Zoveri darted through the obstacles like blurs, dodging blasts with ease. A Thorexian strode forward confidently, using its crystalline body to deflect every shot. When it was Daniel's turn, the murmurs grew louder. "This will be over in seconds," someone chuckled. Daniel stepped into the arena, his hands trembling. The doors sealed behind him, and the simulation began. Drones whirred to life, their energy cannons glowing ominously. The first blast came faster than he anticipated, narrowly missing his shoulder. He ducked, adrenaline surging through his veins. As he sprinted forward, he realized how slow he was compared to the others. Every move felt clumsy, every dodge a near miss. "Come on, Daniel," he muttered to himself, his voice drowned out by the sound of the drones firing. A sharp pain shot through his leg as a blast hit him. He stumbled, gritting his teeth. The crowd outside erupted in laughter. But Daniel refused to give up. Gritting his teeth, he pushed himself forward, diving behind cover. He studied the drones, noticing their predictable patterns. "Okay," he whispered, his breathing ragged. One step at a time. Slowly but surely, he started to adapt. He moved from cover to cover, anticipating the drone's movements. When he finally reached the energy core, his entire body was screaming in pain, but he managed to grab it and hold it high. The arena went silent. The display screen showed his time, far slower than most, but not the worst. Daniel limped out of the arena, his heart pounding. He expected more laughter, more jeers, but instead there was a strange quiet. Even the Phyrexians and Zoveri watched him with a mixture of surprise and grudging respect. General Xylar stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "You are weak, human," he said, his voice cold. "But you have determination. Let's see if that will be enough to survive." The crowd parted as Daniel made his way back to the sidelines. His body ached, and his pride was bruised. But deep inside, something stirred. This was just the beginning. They could mock him all they wanted, but Daniel wasn't about to give up. The first lesson. The Galactic Academy's vast training grounds buzzed with activity. Holographic targets flickered into existence, their faint blue light casting eerie shadows. Alien cadets, each boasting unique abilities, practiced their skills with effortless precision. From plasma bursts to telekinetic throws, the air crackled with energy. Daniel stood on the edge of the group, clutching the standard-issue training blaster. The weapon felt unfamiliar and awkward in his hands. Around him, the other cadets effortlessly handled advanced weapons, their accuracy razor-sharp. "All right, recruits." General Xylar's voice boomed across the field. He towered over the cadets, his sharp, predatory eyes scanning the group. "Today we begin your combat training. This is where warriors are forged and failures are left behind." The cadets straightened, their confidence palpable. Everyone but Daniel, who felt the weight of their gazes. "You." Xylar barked, pointing directly at Daniel. Daniel stiffened, his pulse quickening. "Me, sir." "Yes, you," the general sneered. "Step forward." As Daniel walked hesitantly to the front, a wave of chuckles rippled through the crowd. Whispers of mockery followed him. "Let's see if the human can hit a stationary target," Xylar said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He gestured toward a holographic target that materialized a few meters away. Daniel gripped the blaster tightly. He aimed, his palms sweaty, and fired. The energy bolt missed the target entirely, vanishing into the horizon. The cadets roared with laughter. "Pathetic," Xylar said. "Is this truly the best your species has to offer?" Daniel's cheeks burned. He tightened his grip, adjusted his stance, and fired again. This time, the shot grazed the target's edge. The laughter softened, replaced by murmurs of mild surprise. "Better," Xylar admitted grudgingly, "but still far from acceptable. Your species' lack of physical superiority must be compensated with strategy and precision. Do you have that, human?" Daniel didn't respond, his jaw clenched. He stepped back into the group, his hands trembling. The session continued, with the cadets showcasing their prowess. A Zoveri cadet used its multiple arms to wield 2 blasters, hitting 2 moving targets simultaneously. A Phyrexian shattered a reinforced barrier with a single punch. The other recruits were awe-inspiring, each performance a reminder of how outmatched Daniel was. "Pair up," Xylar ordered. "You will engage in one-on-one combat. The objective is simple: disarm your opponent or force them to surrender." Daniel's stomach sank as a towering reptilian cadet with gleaming scales approached him. The alien's grin revealed rows of sharp teeth. "Looks like I'm stuck with you, human," it hissed. The sparring began. Around him, Daniel saw cadets leaping, grappling, and firing. But he had no time to watch. His opponent lunged, swinging its heavy arm. Daniel barely dodged, stumbling backward. "You're too slow," the reptilian sneered, closing the distance. Daniel's mind raced. He couldn't match the alien's strength or speed. But as he ducked another swing, he noticed the creature's predictable movements. Its overconfidence made it sloppy. The reptilian lunged again, and Daniel rolled to the side, grabbing a nearby training staff. He jabbed at his opponent's legs, causing it to lose balance momentarily. "You'll pay for that," it growled, lunging once more. This time, Daniel was ready. He sidestepped, using the staff to trip the alien. It crashed to the ground with a loud thud, the training blaster falling from its grip. Breathing heavily, Daniel aimed his own blaster at the reptilian. "Do you surrender?" he asked, his voice shaking but determined. The alien's eyes narrowed, but it raised its hands in mock defeat. "Fine, human. You win this round." The crowd fell silent. Daniel looked around, expecting laughter or insults. Instead, he saw something else: respect, albeit grudging. General Tsilar approached, his expression unreadable. "You're resourceful," he said, his tone neutral. "That might just keep you alive. But don't mistake luck for skill. You have a long way to go." Daniel nodded, his heart pounding. He knew the general was right. This was only a small victory, but it was a start. As the cadets dispersed, he caught fragments of whispered conversations. "Maybe humans aren't completely useless," one muttered. "He's clever. I'll give him that," another admitted. Daniel allowed himself a small smile. For the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. He might not be the strongest, the fastest, or the most skilled, but he had something they didn't expect: perseverance. And he was determined to prove that it mattered. The hidden strength. The following week, the cadets assembled in the Galactic Academy's arena, a massive dome with shifting terrains and holographic simulations. The air buzzed with anticipation. Today was the proving trial, a test designed to evaluate each recruit's potential. Success would mean recognition. Failure could mean expulsion. Daniel stood at the edge of the group, scanning the terrain. The arena shifted constantly, creating obstacles: jagged cliffs, sudden trenches, and thick fog. He gripped his training blaster tightly, feeling the weight of the challenge ahead. Around him, cadets whispered, their confidence radiating. "This will be over quickly for the human," one cadet sneered. "Try not to trip over your own feet, Daniel," another chuckled. He ignored them, focusing on the task. He wasn't here to impress them. He was here to survive. "Attention, cadets." General Tsilar's amplified voice echoed through the arena. "The proving trial is not for the faint-hearted. You will navigate the terrain, overcome traps, and retrieve a beacon from the enemy base. Points will be awarded for strategy, efficiency, and combat ability. Remember, failure is not an option." The recruits straightened, their gazes fixed on the holographic map projected in the air. Daniel studied it carefully. The enemy base was at the center of the arena, surrounded by shifting barriers and automated turrets. "Begin." Zylar barked, and the ground trembled as the simulation activated. Daniel moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows. The arena was a chaotic battlefield. Around him, cadets unleashed their powers with precision. One cadet, a Zovari with bioluminescent limbs, leaped across a chasm effortlessly. Another, a hulking Thilrexian, smashed through obstacles like paper. Daniel felt out of place amid the chaos, but he reminded himself of his strength, his mind. As he approached a rocky outcrop, he noticed an automated turret scanning the area. He studied its movement, realizing there was a blind spot. Timing his movements, he darted past it, narrowly avoiding detection. He crouched behind cover, his breathing steady. From his vantage point, he saw two cadets locked in combat near the beacon. One, a towering reptilian, was overpowering a smaller alien with ease. Daniel's instincts screamed at him to stay hidden, but he knew he couldn't win the trial by avoiding conflict. He formulated a plan. The reptilian cadet was too focused on its opponent to notice Daniel creeping closer. With careful aim, Daniel fired his blaster, hitting the ground near the alien's feet. The sudden explosion of dirt startled the reptilian, giving the smaller cadet a chance to escape. "What?" The reptilian roared, spinning to face him. Daniel didn't wait. He fired again, this time at a nearby support beam holding a holographic barrier. The beam collapsed, sending the barrier crashing down and trapping the reptilian in a confined space. "Not bad for a human," the smaller cadet muttered before vanishing into the terrain. Daniel smirked. It wasn't about brute strength, it was about thinking ahead. As he neared the beacon, the terrain shifted again. The ground beneath him cracked, forming a deep trench. He leaped, grabbing onto a protruding ledge. His fingers slipped, and for a terrifying moment, he dangled over the abyss. With a grunt, he hauled himself up, gasping for breath. As he steadied himself, a shadow loomed over him. It was a mechanical drone, its twin barrels glowing ominously. "Of course," Daniel muttered, scrambling to his feet. The drone fired, and he dove behind cover. Blaster shots rained down, chipping away at the rock shielding him. He needed to act fast. Spotting a reflective shard on the ground, he grabbed it and angled it toward the drone. The next shot from the drone hit the shard, refracting the beam and short-circuiting the machine. It sputtered and collapsed in a heap of sparks. Daniel let out a breath of relief. The beacon was finally within reach, glowing brightly atop a pedestal. But just as he stepped forward, a figure blocked his path. It was the Zovari cadet, its bioluminescent limbs glowing menacingly. "You're not taking this," it said, its voice low and threatening. Daniel tightened his grip on his blaster. He knew he couldn't overpower the alien in a straight fight. Instead, he scanned the area, searching for an edge. The Zovari lunged, its limbs striking like whips. Daniel dodged, narrowly avoiding the attack. He spotted a loose rock perched precariously above the pedestal. An idea formed. As the alien prepared to strike again, Daniel aimed his blaster at the rock and fired. The shot dislodged the boulder, which tumbled down and struck the Zovari, pinning its glowing limbs. "Sorry about that," Daniel said, grabbing the beacon and sprinting toward the exit. The arena deactivated as Daniel crossed the finish line, clutching the beacon. The remaining cadets stared, their expressions ranging from disbelief to grudging respect. General Tselar approached, his face unreadable. "You're resourceful, human," he said, his voice gruff. "But don't let this victory go to your head. This was merely the first step." Daniel nodded, his heart pounding. He wasn't here for praise. He was here to prove, to himself and to everyone else, that he belonged. The whispers began again, but this time they carried a different tone. "Maybe the human isn't as weak as we thought." Daniel allowed himself a small smile. The tide was beginning to turn. The turning point. Daniel's unexpected victory in the proving trial didn't silence the academy entirely, but it shifted the whispers. The cadets no longer mocked him outright. Instead, they regarded him with a mix of curiosity and wariness. For Daniel, it was a small but significant change. Days turned into weeks, and the academy's rigorous schedule left little room for rest. Daniel immersed himself in training, pushing himself harder than ever. He knew that earning respect wasn't a single event. It was a process, and he had to prove himself repeatedly. But the challenge ahead was unlike anything the cadets had faced before. "Cadets, report to the central briefing room immediately," came the announcement over the intercom one morning. The recruits hurried into the large circular chamber, where a massive hologram dominated the space. It displayed a simulation of a hostile planet, dark, volcanic, and teeming with dangers. General Tselar stood at the center, his imposing presence silencing the murmurs. "Today, you'll face a live simulation in squads," he announced. "You'll be dropped into hostile terrain to retrieve critical data from a crashed ship. Expect enemy resistance, unpredictable terrain, and limited resources. Work together or fail individually." Dismissed. Daniel found himself assigned to Squad Epsilon, a mix of recruits who had largely avoided him since the proving trial. The team included Sarah, a sharp-eyed Ventili sniper, Jorak, a burly Philrexian with a temper, and Vix, a quiet Zovari who kept to herself. The tension was palpable as they boarded the transport. "You stay out of my way, human," Jorak growled, not bothering to hide his disdain. Daniel nodded, keeping his focus. "I'm not here to slow you down." Sarah, perched on the edge of her seat, rolled her eyes. "Enough. Let's just get through this without killing each other, all right?" The simulation began with a jarring drop. The transport hovered above the volcanic planet, and the recruits leaped into the heap below. Daniel landed awkwardly, the rocky ground uneven beneath his feet. Around him, the squad regrouped. Their mission was simple in theory: retrieve the data core from the shipwreck and extract before the simulation ended. But the holographic enemies were relentless, mimicking the tactics of real adversaries. As they approached the crash site, the first wave of hostiles appeared, automated drones designed to patrol the perimeter. The squad took cover behind jagged rocks. "I'll take the high ground," Sarah said, scaling a nearby ledge with ease. Her sniper rifle gleamed as she took aim. Jorik grunted and charged forward, his brute strength overpowering the smaller drones. Vix, meanwhile, used her glowing limbs to create temporary barriers, shielding the team. Daniel found himself in the middle, analyzing the battlefield. He noticed a gap in the drone patrols and called out, "There's an opening on the left flank. We can get through if we move now." Jorik hesitated but followed, Sarah providing covered fire as they advanced. At the crash site, the squad encountered their biggest challenge yet: a towering mech guarding the data core. Its energy shields pulsed, deflecting their attacks. "We can't get through that," Jorik bellowed, frustration evident. Daniel studied the mech, his mind racing. Its shields were strong, but they flickered briefly whenever it fired its weapon. It was a small window, but it was there. "We have to overload its shields," he said. "If we can make it fire continuously, it'll leave a weak spot." "And how do you propose we do that?" Sarah asked, her tone skeptical. Daniel glanced at Vix. "Can you create a decoy? Something that will keep its attention on one spot?" Vix hesitated, then nodded. "I can try." The plan was risky but effective. Vix generated a glowing decoy that drew the mech's fire, while the rest of the squad attacked its exposed back. Jorik delivered the final blow, using his strength to pierce the mech's core. As the machine collapsed, Daniel rushed forward to retrieve the data core. His hands shook as he secured it in his pack. "Let's move," he shouted, leading the squad toward the extraction point. The simulation ended with the squad safely aboard the transport. As they removed their helmets, the room filled with an uneasy silence. General Sylar entered, his expression unreadable. He reviewed the results before speaking. Squad Epsilon completed the mission with precision and teamwork. Not perfect, but effective. His gaze lingered on Daniel. "It seems you're more than just talk, human. Keep proving it." The squad's dynamic shifted after that mission. Jorik's hostility softened into grudging respect, and Sarah began including Daniel in their strategy discussions. Vix remained quiet but no longer avoided him. Daniel knew he still had a long way to go, but for the first time, he felt like part of the team. The Academy was beginning to see him not as the weakest, but as someone capable of rising to the occasion. A glimpse of true power. The Academy was abuzz after Squad Epsilon's success in the simulation. Cadets whispered about how the weakest human had led his team to victory against impossible odds. Though Daniel tried to stay under the radar, the rumors followed him everywhere. But not everyone was impressed. "Luck," grumbled a senior cadet named Rivik, a towering Drathan known for his arrogance. "That human got lucky. Next time, he won't have a squad to carry him." Rivik's words stung, but Daniel kept his head down. He knew better than to respond. Yet deep inside, the doubt festered. Was Rivik right? Was it just luck? That evening, General Sylar summoned the cadets to the central training arena. The announcement promised a surprise challenge, something unprecedented. The room was filled with an air of anticipation. As the cadets filed in, they were greeted by the sight of a massive, shimmering orb floating in the center of the arena. Its surface pulsed with an otherworldly energy, and strange glyphs danced across its surface. "This," General Sylar began, his voice commanding attention, "is a Nexus core, a simulation device unlike any you've faced before. It adapts to your strengths and weaknesses, pushing you to your absolute limit." The room fell silent. The cadets exchanged uneasy glances. "Each of you will face the Nexus alone. Sylar continued. The goal is not to win but to survive as long as possible. Only then will you uncover the depths of your potential, or lack thereof. One by one, the cadets stepped forward, disappearing into the glowing orb. Each time, the arena's holographic display showed their struggles. Some performed admirably, fending off waves of simulated enemies. Others faltered quickly, overwhelmed by the Nexus' relentless assault. When it was Rivik's turn, he smirked confidently as he entered. The display showed him battling ferociously, taking down enemy after enemy. The crowd cheered as he lasted longer than anyone before finally being overwhelmed. Rivik emerged from the Nexus, grinning and raising his arms. "Let's see anyone top that," he boasted. Then it was Daniel's turn. He hesitated at the base of the Nexus, staring into its swirling depths. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to step forward. The moment he entered, the world around him changed. He found himself standing in a barren wasteland, the sky dark and ominous. The ground trembled as enemies materialized, hulking, shadowy figures armed with energy weapons. Daniel's first instinct was to run, but he knew better. He held his ground, analyzing their movements. He ducked and rolled, avoiding their attacks, then struck back with precision. But the Nexus didn't relent. The enemies grew faster, smarter. The terrain shifted beneath his feet, forcing him to adapt. His body screamed for rest, but he pushed on, determined not to fail. As the simulation reached its climax, the Nexus revealed its final challenge. A towering monstrosity, glowing with the same energy as the orb. It radiated power, and Daniel felt his confidence waver. "This is impossible," he muttered, his breath ragged. But then, something changed. Deep within him, a spark ignited, a feeling he couldn't explain. Time seemed to slow as his instincts took over. He dodged the creature's massive strikes with precision, his movements fluid and almost unnatural. With each attack, he countered perfectly, exploiting weaknesses he hadn't even consciously noticed. The cadets watching outside the Nexus fell silent. The display showed Daniel moving with an elegance and ferocity they hadn't seen before. Even General Sylar leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Daniel's final blows struck the creature's core, shattering it in a blinding explosion of light. He collapsed to his knees, gasping for air as the simulation ended. When he emerged from the Nexus, the arena was deathly quiet. All eyes were on him, disbelief etched across every face. Rivik, who had been so confident moments ago, looked pale. What was that?" he stammered. General Sylar stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Cadet Daniel," he said slowly, "what you showed in there was not luck. It was power. Raw, untapped, and extraordinary." Daniel didn't know how to respond. He was as surprised as anyone else, but deep down, he realized something had awakened within him, something that could change everything. Daniel's hands moved on their own, guiding the ship through a barrage of enemy fire. He weaved between explosions, his targeting systems locking onto key vulnerabilities with pinpoint accuracy. Outside the battle, cadets and officers watched in awe as Daniel's ship darted through the chaos like a predator among prey. His movements were impossibly precise, his attacks devastating. Back in the command center, Sylar observed the live feed with a mix of astonishment and unease. "General," the Celeran scientist said quietly, "whatever is inside that boy, it's more than we anticipated." Sylar nodded, his expression grim. "Let's just hope it's enough to save us." For Daniel, the battle was more than a fight for survival. It was a chance to uncover the truth about himself, and to prove that even the weakest can rise to greatness. The Academy's new champion. The battlefield was a haze of fire and debris as Daniel's ship tore through the enemy fleet. His instincts, or perhaps the mysterious force within him, guided his every move. Each shot he fired hit its mark with surgical precision. Each maneuver evaded danger by mere inches. In the skies above the Academy, Daniel faced the lead enemy ship, a colossal dreadnought bristling with weaponry. Its presence alone was enough to crush morale, but Daniel felt no fear. Something deep inside him stirred, urging him forward. Back at the command center, the tension was palpable. General Xylar stood rigid, watching the live feed of Daniel's battle. The room was silent, save for the hum of machinery and the occasional gasp as Daniel narrowly avoided another barrage of enemy fire. "General," the accelerant scientist whispered, "his neural activity is off the charts. Whatever is guiding him, it's pushing him beyond normal limits." Xylar's gaze remained fixed on the screen. "Let's hope it doesn't push him too far." In the cockpit, Daniel's mind felt like a storm. Flashes of memories, some his, some foreign, flickered before his eyes. He saw battles he had never fought, strategies he had never learned, and weapons he had never wielded. "This isn't just me," he muttered under his breath. "What's happening to me?" The dreadnought's cannons charge, their glowing energy promising utter annihilation. But Daniel didn't flinch. His hands moved before he could think, activating the fighter's experimental weapons system. The cockpit's interface lit up, and a voice echoed in his mind. A voice that wasn't his own. "Target locked. Engage." A blinding beam of energy shot from Daniel's ship, piercing the dreadnought's hull. The massive vessel trembled as explosions rippled through its structure, tearing it apart from within. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent, all eyes on the dreadnought as it crumbled into a fiery wreck. Cheers erupted across the academy as cadets and officers celebrated the impossible victory. The enemy fleet, now leaderless and disorganized, began to retreat. Daniel's ship hovered in the aftermath, its once sleek frame scarred from battle. Inside, he sat motionless, trying to process what had just happened. Hours later, Daniel was back at the academy, standing before a crowd of cadets and instructors. The atmosphere was electric with gratitude and admiration. For the first time, the mockery and doubt were gone, replaced by respect. General Xylar stepped forward, his expression unusually warm. "Cadet Daniel, you've done more than save this academy. You've shown us that strength comes in many forms, and that even the most underestimated among us can achieve greatness." The crowd erupted into applause, but Daniel's mind was elsewhere. The flashes of memory, the voice in the cockpit, none of it made sense. He couldn't shake the feeling that his journey was far from over. Later that evening, Daniel found himself alone in the training hall. He stared at the reflection of his bruised and battered face in the glass. "Who am I?" he whispered to himself. As if in answer, the voice from the battle echoed faintly in his mind. "You are more than you know." Back in the command center, Xylar and the accelerant scientist reviewed the data from the battle. "Whatever's inside him," the scientist said, "it's beyond anything we've encountered. This isn't just human evolution. It's something more." Xylar nodded solemnly. "He's not just a cadet anymore. He's a weapon, and the galaxy is going to notice." The next day, Daniel was called to Xylar's office. The general's tone was grave. "Daniel," he began, "you've proven yourself in ways no one could have expected. But this, whatever's inside you, it's a mystery we can't ignore. We need to understand it, for your sake, and for the galaxy's." Daniel straightened. "What do you want me to do, sir?" Xylar handed him a datapad. "There's a mission, off the record. If you're willing to accept, it might give us the answers we need." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "I'll do it." As he left the office, the weight of his new reality settled on him. He had gone from the weakest cadet to the Academy's last hope, and now, the galaxy's greatest question.